So New World launched 2 years ago to disastrous results. With a myriad of technical and design problems, it got off to a real bad start. After 2 years, they've just launched their first expansion. Because of the launch, they put the base game on sale. So in an evening of ADHD-fueled impulse decisions, I bought it, expecting to play for a few hours and refund or drop it. But here I am, over 24 hours later, and I have to say, damn, this game is comfy. It feels like an alternate timeline third-person RuneScape, and I love RuneScape. Can I say it's definitively a good game? I'm unsure, but I can say that I get home from work at 2:45, I play for an hour, and suddenly it's 3:30 in the morning and I have to go to bed, to then repeat the same process the next day. With its open world gathering, crafting, and fun progression system, I'm having a blast gathering materials, skipping the story dialogue, and becoming a tradesman. New World has a storied past. I'm not going to bore you by going over the history, because I don't even know the full extent of it. On screen are some videos that cover it far better than I could. I want to talk about the experience that I've had as a brand new player. We have a lot to cover here, so let's jump into one of the quicker segments we can talk about, the story.
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
I do not fucking care. I seriously could not give less of a shit than I do right now. When I played the beta before launch, I read it and went, yeah, generic fantasy colonial hybrid stuff. The story is probably serviceable, but chief, I ain't reading all that. I'm happy for you though, or I'm sorry that happened. I do not care. If I want to play an MMO for the story, I play Final Fantasy XIV. New World has been out for 2 years and I've heard not a single word about the story other than it's eh. After that amount of time for any game, you would hear something about it being good or bad. The consensus seems to be, it's a story. It serves to get you from A to B. So why should I waste my time or yours by going into something we both don't care about? But oh wait, there's more, because I'm glad I don't care about the story. I'm glad I skipped it, because at the time of writing, the main story has been bugged out, and I'm not able to progress further. This addendum to my script was added Tuesday, October 17th, with the Halloween update that fixed a bunch of bugs and quest progress issues, but not the one that me and a third of my server are still stuck on. 9 whole days that I've not been able to progress the MSQ and get an ultimate ability. They have now done 4 hotfixes and it's still not fixed. I'm sorry if you were hoping for a breakdown of the key points, but that's not what got me playing New World. What has caught my attention is the gathering, crafting, and combat loop. A well-oiled cycle that always keeps you on the lookout for the next resource node you need.
You see that? It's made of chicken. It's actually made of chicken. You kill it, you got free chicken.
So as mentioned, New World works on a triangle of kill, gather, and craft, gathering materials from wood, stone, and metals to various types of herbs for use in many different systems. As soon as you finish the combat tutorial, you're immediately engaging with this system, gathering flint and sticks from bushes to make a camp which acts as a respawn point, to then crafting your first set of flint tools. With the flint tools made, you then have access to gathering loads of materials. There are 5 gathering skills: logging, mining, fishing, harvesting, and tracking and skinning. Every skill in New World goes up to level 200, or 250 if you have the expansion, with new unlocks around every 50 levels. With materials gathered, you then need to use one of the 5 refining skills: smelting, woodworking, leatherworking, weaving, and stone cutting. With refined materials, you can then use them on one of the 7 crafting skills: weaponsmithing, armoring, engineering, jewel crafting, arcana, cooking, and furnishing. They're all mostly self-descriptive, but arcana is used for both magic weapons and potion making. This creates a second triangle inside the first. If the main is kill, gather, craft, then the secondary triangle is gather, refine, produce. Whilst similar in nature, the higher level the material you're making, the more refining and gathering has to happen. Take smelting and making metals for example. To start, you gather iron ore to make iron bars. Iron ore is the lowest metal you can gather, and due to the nature of the crafting system, you are always incentivized to gather more. To make steel bars, you require 3 iron bars, as well as some charcoal you get by burning wood, and then sand flux. Sand flux is a refining material, and a big reason as to why even if you don't like the combat, you want to go to combat areas to loot chests. Chests contain a variety of rewards, like resources, gold, or armor, but they also contain varying amounts and types of refining materials that are needed to increase the tier of refining you're trying to do. So you've made steel bars by using 3 iron bars. To upgrade that to the next tier of metal, which is star metal, you need 6 6-star metal ore and 2 steel bars, alongside some more charcoal and flux. So now that 1-star metal costs 6 iron bars alongside its base material cost. The incremental refinement is a loop that can sound tedious, but with how well New World Gathering flows, it honestly feels endearing. If I need more iron to continue crafting, either to make a weapon, armor, or even just to level my smelting skill to access new materials, I could just buy off the marketplace of player trading, but by doing that, it can get expensive, and I'm missing out on all the gathering experience. Not just the mining XP, but if I set out on a journey to a nearby mine because I need iron and gold, along the way I might stumble across some hemp. That's great because it gives me harvesting XP and allows me to refine it into cloth for multiple crafting skills. You can set out with the idea of just getting the resource you came for, but then there's a chest here, some animals to skin there, and then some plant materials used to make stronger potions just off the beaten path. It all feels rewarding, and that the systems play into each other. Now there is one caveat. This probably won't be appealing if you don't have the numbers go up goofy gamer brain. As mentioned, I'm a big RuneScape player, and as such, getting XP for everything you do really activates my ammons. And with the way live service games and battle pass systems are, in order to create user retention, arbitrary rewards are sprinkled out constantly to give you a feeling of being rewarded even when you're not. I do love Fortnite, but getting XP for opening every chest you see is just another way of them creating habit forming and enticing you into the battle pass grind. But New World is one of those games where the grind is the game. MMOs are inherently grindy. They are designed to be played for a long time. Some have slow leveling, some have low drop chances, some have arbitrary failing mechanics for upgrading gear. Looking at you, Lost Ark, you over-monetized arsehole. The gathering and crafting system is very satisfying for fans of survival games, and is basically second nature once you start, if you've played a few survival games before. Whilst there is no hunger, thirst, or tiredness system, gathering is just as useful, if not more than in those games, as your ability to help yourself or others is tied to how much gathering and crafting levels you have to produce stuff. Although you could just buy things on the market board at double or higher the price. There is a negative to gathering, and it's the open world resources are shared. If an area is popular for hemp or iron, you can bet your ass there's a whole bunch of other players farming the exact same thing there. Honestly, this is one of the 2 things that caused any amount of burnout in me. I was able to get enough of all the other materials I needed, but I just couldn't get any iron to sustain my crafting progression needs. I looked at a third-party map to see where a lot of iron was, and when I went there, I couldn't get any over the crowd of people fighting over the resources. I looked up videos of recommended spots, which was a terrible idea, because everyone has the exact same fucking idea. So those spots were taken. One way I found to get the iron I needed was just to roam, gathering some here, some there, and then after a while of roaming, I'd found my own loot route that provides a great amount of iron that isn't contested by other people going for the same nodes. And I will not fucking tell you guys where it is. This is mine. If I see someone else running my route, I will grief you. Now, one skill I neglected to mention so far is music. Give me a second, because I have to gush. I love rhythm games, I love rhythm minigames, and I love being able to play music in multiplayer games. So to be given a Guitar Hero style minigame that can be leveled up, new instruments and songs to unlock and craft with varying perks, and you can play in a full band of 4 with other players all doing the minigame, and the songs actually giving you and other players buffs. The best way I can describe this is that the first time I found out this was a thing, and some dude taught me how to play, I couldn't shake the absolute beaming smile I had on my face. Even now, I still smile at the nature of this mechanic, because your performance is ranked on a 4-star system, and if you miss a couple beats and go down a rank, the power of the buff you give out is lessened. I fucking love it. I love the smile of performing well. I love the awkwardness as you miss a beat and hear the off-note twang. It just makes me happy. I'd also like to thank a certain king called Gilnocky. This dude taught me about the system, we played together for a while, and overall, it was just one of those wholesome MMO experiences you really look for in these games. Okay, gushing over. Thank you for indulging me. So in summary, I really like the crafting and gathering. Simple, yet iterative. It's the main highlight for me. Now we get onto combat, and the rest of the mechanical experience. And this is what I'm a bit less of a fan of. The too long didn't read is the combat is okay. To get into specifics, New World uses an action combat system, with 3 primary abilities being choosable for each weapon, alongside a light and a heavy basic attack. Certain weapons also have the ability to block. Each weapon has a leveling system, up to 20, and there are 15 weapon types, with the most recent being the flail that was added with the expansion. You've got one-handed swords, rapiers, hatchets, and flails, two-handed spears, great axes, great swords, and warhammers. For physical ranged, there's bows, muskets, and blunderbusses. Or is it blunderbuss eye? Or even blunderbussy? Nope, stop that, I take that back, we are not going there. Finally, there's magical ranged, fire staffs, life staffs, ice gauntlets, and void gauntlets. You can use 2 of these weapons at any time, and when playing solo, you can basically rock whatever works for you. I really like the fire staff, as it has a flamethrower ability that shreds groups of enemies, and it's pretty brain dead, and either a great sword or a great axe for AoE spin to win and big hit. But when playing in a group, New World does follow the typical MMO combat triangle. A healer will always use a life staff, with either a void gauntlet to accentuate the healing, or a DPS weapon that reduces cooldowns. Tanks will use weapons that have good defensive abilities, like the sword and the shield, or grouping abilities like the great axes to pull enemies in. And DPS just uses whatever does the biggest damage numbers. Each weapon archetype has a skill tree with 2 paths. Whilst you can spec into both, you want enough points in one side to get the key passive that either accentuates or changes the way you play with that weapon. The key passive I chose for my fire staff means that once I get an enemy to 5 burning stacks, I can heavy attack them to consume the stacks to do a big burst of damage. Each level up of your character gives you 3 skill points to put into one of 5 classic RPG attributes. At the base level, each of these attributes increases damage with the respective weapons listed alongside them. Some weapons scale with 2 stats, like the greatsword, and others, like the fire staff, scale only with 1. You also gain attribute points with the gear you have equipped. The better the colored rarity and gear score of your weapons and armors also increase the amount of attributes they will increase. Each pip on these bars is a bonus of varying uses depending on the stats. For example, one will increase heavy attack damage, or another could increase health potion restoration. It's a nice little bonus for getting to stat milestones. Armor is another RPG classic of a 3-tiered weight system. Light, medium, and heavy. No one's saying that a spellcaster can't wear heavy armor, but it might not be the best idea for damage output. There's an equip load weight system that gives various modifiers for staying in certain weight brackets. If you have all light armor, you'll do 20% extra damage and healing spells are 30% stronger. Your dodge is faster and longer, but you gain the most amount of hit stun after being hit by an enemy. But then if you're in all heavy armor, tanky as shit, you'll have 15% stronger block, crowd control is 20% less effective on you, and you have the lowest amount of hit stun after an attack. But as a trade-off, your dodge is terrible, and if you try to heal using lifesteal or magic, it's 30% reduced. Since it's based on weight brackets and not explicitly having all of one tier on, you can do a little bit of mixing and matching. All light with a medium or heavy helmet will keep you in the lightweight class if the material isn't too heavy, because armor also has different modifiers based on weight. Light armor has the lowest base modifiers for defensive stats like resists and armor. For a light set, you could gain a plus 40 base armor, and a heavy armor set could give you plus 120. I actually really like this system. It's nothing new or groundbreaking, but it works well. It incentivizes roles and allows class fantasy without a class-based system. Honestly, I really enjoy the systems behind the combat a lot, and I think they all play together nicely. But the raw feel of the combat, and even some of the movement to an extent, doesn't feel right. It feels clunky at times, floaty at others, and just off at moments. Maybe it's due to some of the animation lock-ins, which you can dodge out of to cancel, which I do like, but it's the kind of thing you can sort of see in the video, but properly feel when you play. Most of the ranged attacks are actually projectiles, which I do like. You can lead shots at a distance to hit enemies, but firing off light attacks with the fire staff feels underwhelming. Something about the little flick of the staff has no oomph for me, and whilst the flamethrower attack is cool, maybe I like it because it does big damage, rather than feels good to use. Movement is another factor. There are loads of jumping puzzles, although putting white paint on a lot of them reduces the puzzle element, and the ability to pull yourself up any ledge you can jump to is really nice for exploring hills or climbing over or into new locations. But intricate jumps feel rough with the almost tank-like controls, and the game has no sprint option. The speed you see is what you get unless you buy the expansion to get a mount. It's safe to say you'll be using the auto run key a lot in this game. So whilst the combat itself can either be dull or jank at points, the best way I can describe it is serviceable. Against AI, you're not going to feel like a mechanical god unless you've got a cheesy build and good damage, but there is also PvP in this game, which we'll get to shortly. But overall, passable, serviceable, and alright are the 3 ways I could describe the raw combat itself. Let's now talk about the systems at play, from reputation to factions, faction leveling, and PvP, from arena to open world. So alongside your gathering and killing adventure, you'll be ranking up standing with whatever region you're in. Leveling up your standing with a specific territory gives you access to buffs that are the same overall for each region, but are only applicable to the region you've leveled and are in. You can get increased XP, more storage space, cheaper crafting costs, higher territory standing gain, faster resource gathering, and general quality of life, but not essential bonuses. Leveling up your standing is done either passively through general activities like skilling and killing, or can be done by taking bounties off the public board. These tasks are filler that give XP, resources, and standing. They reset pretty frequently and allow for bumps of XP to get you to that next level, or more territory standing to get you to that next gathering speed or storage space buff. The other standing and reputation grind is with faction. There are 3 factions in New World: the Yellow Covenant, the Purple Syndicate, and the Green Marauders. These 3 factions have more impact than territories, as they help you get better gear by doing bounties for them, but they also factor heavily into PvP. At any time, either at a town or at a fast travel point, you can hit U to go into PvP mode. Once out of a safe zone, you can attack anyone else that is PvP flagged, that's not in your faction. A red symbol next to their name means they have PvP mode on, and are down to clown. You also get a 5% XP bonus for having PvP on, but new players should not do that, as a death squad of max level players will descend on you and end your life very fast. But PvP and the open world are very much intertwined in New World. Each region has one city that's always a safe zone, one fort you can access only in PvP mode, and multiple outposts. Forts are what whole factions fight over, and outposts are small-scale capture points. The 3 factions fight for control over the forts and outposts in order to get the benefits they bring. If a faction controls part of a zone, fast travel cost inside that zone is reduced, and if they control the whole region, it's free inside that region. The same goes for cross-region travel. No control is full price, partial is reduced, and full control of both means it's free. If your faction controls the fort of that specific region, you gain 5% more XP and 20% more faction standing in your region, as well as a specific benefit unique to each region's fort that is only applicable in that region. Honestly, it feels like they took a page out of PlanetSide 2's book in order to make this system, and I think it's really fucking cool. If you don't care about PvP, you can just straight up ignore it, and it'll have a barely negligible effect on you. But it really incentivizes factions to act as factions. Combine that with only being able to join a clan in the same faction as you, and it helps to create a tighter knit community than most MMOs. There's also 3v3 arena PvP, 20 vs 20 outpost rush, and 50 vs 50 war mode. They all reward similar stuff: reputation, XP if you're not at the cap, money, and a PvP currency called Azoth Salt that's used in a Battle Pass Lite system that infinitely generates a 3-tiered track with various rewards to help progression. 3v3 arena is as it sounds. Simple, yet tight. And it's designed pretty well, matching you with players roughly around your level, although skill level could vary wildly. There is no role setting in 3v3, so if one team has a pocket healer and the other doesn't, the odds are in favour of the healer team, unless the non-healer team has some real gamers. 20 vs 20 Outpost Rush is unlocked at level 60, and is organised mobile light chaos that also runs at terrible frame rates. It's basically domination. 3 control points that are outposts, and your team has to capture them, and hold them to gain points over time. The first team to 1000 points wins. There are multiple other mechanics, such as killing nearby wildlife to summon them as ghosts to attack the enemy, building fortifications like reinforced doors or Gatling guns, and even a Baron buff, called the Baroness, that spawns every 10 minutes and buffs the team that kills it. This mode is decent. You do feel cool grouping up in small squads, holding different parts of the outposts, fending off enemies at the gate, or charging in with your team to try and contest the point. But I would really like it if I could get a consistent 60 FPS, even when I have all the graphics settings on lowest. You'll respawn away from the fight, smooth, buttery 100 FPS. And then as you get nearer and nearer the cluster of fighting players, the frames stutter down to a jittery 30 FPS. And playing a healer that's non-cooldown heals are all skill shots makes consistently healing rough when frames affect your aim. War is 50 vs 50, and it's not always available. War is based off of 2 factions fighting, and a clan from each faction having said war. Clans can challenge each other to dispute territory on behalf of their faction. In concept, awesome. In practice, well, I either miss them because they're all right in the middle of the day when I'm working, or because I'll crash once I load into them. I really love waiting for the war to start, then the 15-minute prep period for everyone to zone in, and then crashing when I'm leaving through the gate. Awesome, really. Whilst you should be in a clan to do these, you can also apply to other clan wars as a mercenary, but mercenaries can only make up half of a team, the rest being members of that clan. So do your part, join your clan wars. The last part of PvP is a semi-recently introduced mechanic called influence races, where at certain times in certain zones, factions fight to capture points and massacre each other, all for the sake of gaining or not losing the most amount of influence. The faction that currently holds the territory has to retain more than the other factions lose, otherwise that region will be destabilized and easier to capture. This PvP is just chaos. Great chaos, but chaos. Better running than the 20 versus 20 because there's generally less players in the open world fighting, but once you get to an outpost, expect it to chug real bad. Dungeons are another thing that's in New World. First of all, the LFG system feels antiquated. There is no role select queuing into them. There's a grouping board you can look at for each dungeon that lists parties that are recruiting, but for the early game dungeons, there was basically no one doing them, which surprised me as there were so many new characters running around. But I believe it's that the early game main story quest gives enough XP that it basically invalidates the need to do those dungeons. But there are incentives to do them that we'll get onto in a moment. Once I hit level cap, I wanted to do the dungeons I had missed and see what they were like. And honestly, they're pretty decent. Nothing amazing mechanically, but some have light teamwork elements like standing on buttons, some have cool mechanics, and some have slow mechanics. Like someone having to carry a torch to burn down barriers. One thing that is inconsistent with New World is that some of the areas don't look good. And some of them look beautiful. The same goes for the dungeons. Some of them are boring as fuck cave systems, or ancient ruins but without all the mystery. But then there's others, like this level 60 dungeon that goes hard as fuck. Some of the boss fights were simple tank and spanks, other ones had mechanics. I think whilst simple, the Dynasty Shipyard boss was my favourite, as it deployed totems that either had to be killed or positioned around to dodge the multiple special attacks that could go off. With a decent team, it's simple. With a new team, it's like a horde of headless chickens. Now usually in MMOs, I'm a DPS. If not that, then I can tank sometimes. But New World is different. In order to get my seat at the table, this table being parties for the max level dungeon, I've actually started healing? Now if I'm a healer in a game, it tells you something very specific. That healing is easy as shit in that game. And in New World, healing is easy as shit. Once you have a few levels in the life staff. Seriously, with the life staff and the correct skill trees, if my normal attacks hit a teammate on their way to an enemy, it heals the teammate. So hit or miss, as long as I'm slinging spells one way or another, the team will mostly stay alive. I have 2 radius-based heals and a direct heal. The other weapon can either accentuate the healing, like a Void Gauntlet, or can be a defensive or mobility weapon, like the Rapier. Dungeons shower you with loot for fighting the enemies and opening the chests. A bunch is going to be armor that you just don't want, but with the scrapping system, occasionally you get resources from dismantling armor that will allow you to gain direct XP and crafting skills, which is a great bonus. One dungeon a week is chosen as the Mutator dungeon. This one has 3 extra difficulties added on top. You have to complete the story mode to access tier 1 to access tier 2, and so on. Some of these modifiers really change it from a tank and spank to something way more organised. New World's proximity voice chat isn't always used to its most efficient, and is really just for shitposting in town. But once you're in some of the harder dungeons, where certain players get debuffs or are set to explode if they don't move away from the others, team play really becomes more prevalent. Higher tier mutators drop higher gear score weapons, as well as more base proprietary materials that each dungeon has for crafting endgame gear. Whilst this is no Mythic Plus system, it works well for the game that New World is. Corruption portals are open world combat events that are always active. They are simple in nature and basically involve killing enemies and then holding E on a couple of things. They're rewarding in a loot sense, but grinding these out can get repetitive fast. They go up in levels as the regions do, and occasionally ones spawn that recommend 5 players, because they are filled with higher level enemies. It's still kinda repetitive, but nice and brainless if that's what you want. With the general content discussed, let's go on to the expansion specific content, and how it's both useful and a waste of money. So this is where things get a little bit controversial. Originally, New World developers said they wouldn't add mounts. Can you take a guess at the main feature of New World's first expansion in 2 years of updates? Yeah, safe to say the community is split. On one hand, people love the quality of life that the mounts bring for faster travel. On the other hand, it feels like a bit more than a quality of life in PvE gameplay. I had a situation where I was trying to gather hemp in a decently popular area. All the peasants on foot were fighting for resources, sprinting to the next one to get it before the others could. And then John Horseman comes in, upon his noble steed, and proceeds to snipe every single hemp spot before we could get there. It's also an advantage in PvP for repositioning or taking outposts in open world PvP, allowing well-coordinated squads to outflank and gank runners. This isn't even to mention the level cap increase that comes with the expansion, meaning base game players are stuck at level 60, and expansion players are level 65, with a brand new tier of gear called relics. Even if stats are normalized, the passive effects that this gear can provide could be the make or break in a fight if the user's competent. The big debate around the expansion revolves around the level cap increase, the price, and removing a region of the map for non-payers. Let's start with the latter. The new region in the expansion isn't new at all. It's a rework of one of the regions that was in at launch. They've completely changed it and made it new, sparkly, shiny, and an appropriate level for the expansion cap increase. But in order to do this, they've taken away one of the regions from the base game that people paid for. 11 regions in the base game. Now with this expansion, base game players only have 10. This is pretty garbage in all honesty. Whilst I am a new player and as such only know the game from this change, as well as having access to this area because I bought the expansion around level 50, this still irks me. I wish I could have given a before and after explanation, but unfortunately, that's out of my wheelhouse. But this expansion has also increased the level cap of enemies in the non-DLC areas. Now some high tier areas that were base 60 now have enemies up to 65 or even 70. So base game players that were running content in that zone the day before the DLC were given a way more challenging and less rewarding experience because of this. Also, leveling the horse is strange too. Instead of gaining levels by just using the horse a lot like you'd assume, you either do races that get worse XP over time, or you level them up by feeding them food. And the amount of food you can feed them is hard capped daily. So you either need to make or buy the best tier of food you can use, and do that 3 times every day. Time gating horse progression is a really strange decision to make. Whilst you can continue to do the horse races, they fall off XP wise in comparison to high tier food. Finally, we get onto the price. Angry Earth costs £25. For that, you get the following: access to a mount and the ability to level up the mount skill, increased skill caps to 250 for all non-combat skills, 1 reworked zone, an increased level cap by 5, 1 new dungeon, 1 new tier of faction standing, 1 new tier of Heart Rune ultimate ability, and a campaign that felt like it lasted around 5 hours. Is it worth it and value for the money? No. Do you need it to do endgame progression and get quality of life? Yes. Do I recommend getting it? If you get to level 30, you'll know if you want to play more New World. And if you get to level 60, there'll be a good chance you've already bought the DLC for the Mount Quality of Life. The expansion is lacking in content, but considering the game did get free updates for 2 years because they fumbled the launch so bad, the situation is left ambivalent. If you pay full price for the game, the expansion will feel weak. If you paid a tenner for the game like me, then the expansion price feels fine, if a little bit expensive. But now we get to the major detractor for my enjoyment of New World: the bugs and performance. So when I started playing this game, the day after the expansion launched, it ran like absolute dog shit. In town, I was down to about 20 FPS on medium settings, and out in the open world, even though it said I had 70 FPS, the stuttering, hitching, and choppiness made it feel far worse. After a day or two, a patch was released to fix performance on the server end, which did really help. Now I can play on high or very high and have 90 FPS in the open world, but going into the starter or busy towns can rapidly drop to that 30 mark. With a bunch of the performance being tied to the server, and not ideal FPS even with my good rig, I hesitate to recommend this to those who are scraping the minimum specs. Another big performance gain for both load times and general performance is put it on an SSD or an M2. Aside from it being 2023, and you should really already have at least one SSD by now, more and more games are coming out just not playing nice with HDD's outdated read and write speeds. One thing that's not a bug, but a big negative, and I don't know where to put it, is the transmog system. The system itself, awesome, so cool. Once you acquire a bit of gear, you could transmog into it, but they require transmog tokens. Tokens that cost real money, or you could randomly get 1 a week by looting enemies in chests. I get that the game is a box price and has no sub, but to have cash shop outfits and then the transmog system for normal items, that fucking blows. I've also had bugs of varying degrees, from funny but annoying ones like auto-run breaking because every time I hit left or right my character would just do a strange wiggle, to just hard crashes, either just doing nothing out in the open world and it turns off, or booting up the game and fast travelling and it just crashes during the loading screens. There seems to be no rhyme or reason for these, but a strange effect is that it also crashes my Discord. I would believe this to be a RAM issue, but I have 32 fucking gigabytes. If the servers are playing nice, you should have a good time. If they aren't, then at least the performance being bad isn't on your system's end, I guess? But the most heinous of bugs is the fact that the main campaign quest has had multiple progression-stopping bugs ever since the expansion launched. At the time of writing this, it's been 9 days that I've been unable to progress the main story. 9 whole fucking days! With multiple hotfixes, mind you, that all did fucking nothing to fix me and everyone else that gets to the same goddamn quest step. I've gotten to level cap and beaten the expansion story, and I'm working my way to getting best in slot gear pieces, all without the ability to finish the main story, and get the ability to use a Heart Rune ultimate ability. I didn't mention Heart Runes in the combat section, because if I can't get access to using them, they might as well not fucking exist at all to me. The bugs and performance issues are the main complaints for me, which is a shame, because I do really like the game as a whole. If these weren't there, I would be singing this game's praises from the rooftops. With the caveat that this game really relies on you having absolute chimp brain. I mean caveman mode, dopamine desiring, numbers go up, goofy gamer brain. The crafting and gathering system is great for a casual player to turn your mind off and make numbers go up. The combat is average to decent, and the settings and aesthetics alternate between fine and beautiful. The PvP is loved by some and left by others. But its open world 3-faction conflict system is a wonder to observe and be a part of. With every day comes different power plays, clan betrayals, and the chance to fight for the right to defend your town. I hope you found some insight with what I've discussed, and hopefully you can see if New World is your kind of game. I'd say for a tenner, easily worth the money. For £30 at full price, maybe less so. And so we come back to the point I made in the beginning. Is New World a good game? I wish I could give you a solid answer. I describe New World as an average to decent game, but one that I have enjoyed my time with immensely. Everyone has those games that they know are a 6 or 7 out of 10, that you would rate an 8 or higher. And for me, this is one of them. Will I return after my time ends? Will I return with another expansion? Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm glad the game is a pay-once type deal instead of subscription, because that really incentivizes me just dropping back in now and again to see how the Land of Eternum evolves. I started writing this review at 24 hours of playtime. I'm now approaching 90 hours, so I'll have to see how much more is in me, because at its core, this game, like RuneScape, is goal-driven. Once you've done the main quests and the other side stuff, the only thing keeping you in Eternum is what you want to do. Once I get my best in slot, or close to it, I'll probably drop it for a while. But it's up to Amazon to make content that'll make me want to come back. For now, that's all from me. Thank you for getting to the end of this video. You know how people say, don't go shopping when you're hungry? I really shouldn't write when I'm hyperfixating. This has become my longest video somehow. So maybe I should write in moderation. I also have channel memberships now. If you'd like to support me, this is the best way to do it. But no pressure. I do like money, but I also have a real job too. Either way, like and subscribe if you feel like it, and remember, proximity chat should be added to every game. This is not a request. This is a demand. If you're making a game, add proximity voice chat so the community can shitpost. Thank you for watching.